Samuel, Celia, Hannah, and Simon made friendships with children that lived in their house, despite the fact that Riva prohibited them. They had nobody else to be friends with and needed to live their own lives, making the best of it. Samuel mostly took after his father. He was handsome, and his curly dark hair and deep blue eyes easily attracted girls. He liked to sing, and his incredible voice made street girls melt when they listened to his songs. However, there was only one girl he was interested in. It was Sarah, Isaac, and Jeannie's daughter. He missed her so much. He didn't know where she lived and how to find her. It was a long time ago when he last saw her. Samuel secretly saw Sarah when he was able to sneak from his mother. They spent a wonderful time together. But then, after the government confiscated Isaac's house, Samuel didn't know where to find her. He missed her terribly. Then, on a hot summer day, Samuel was walking down the street and suddenly found her walking right toward him. Sarah was 11 years old, but in spite of her young age, she looked very mature and strong. They were very happy to see each other. "I looked for you everywhere." Samuel hugged her. "Where were you?" "They threw us out of the house," Sarah replied, crying. "I know. Your house looks like a barrack." "Yes, I saw it." "So, where do you live now?" "We live in my grandma's house. It's outside the town." "Is your father still a police officer?" "No. When he had a job, he was trying to find a wife or a nanny for us. But it didn't work out. Then, he lost his job and didn't have money for a nanny. When they took our house and threw us into the street, Daddy tried to fight them, and I thought they would kill him. It happened so fast that we didn't even have a chance to take a warm blanket for Mayor. He is just 2 years old. He was so cold," Sarah cried, recalling the events. "Now things are not so bad. We live with our grandma. The house is very tiny, just one room, but we live there alone. If we had more than one room, we would probably have neighbors in another room. We have a bed, and we all sleep together. It's nice and cozy to sleep with Grandma when she hugs us. She's very old, and usually her feet are cold. So Fega and I warm her up at night. The only problem is that it's too far from your house. It's not my house anymore. You know that. We live with a bunch of rats." "I know that. But you know what I mean." She looked at Samuel and smiled warmly. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, Sarah." He embraced her in his arms. "I heard about your daddy. I'm so sorry." "So, how are you?" Sarah asked. "Well, Mom found a job. She teaches at school now. So, at least we're not starving anymore." "That's good. I'm always starving, especially after Dad left us." "What?" "Yes. He said that he'd be back soon. He went to the city to find a job, but that was so long ago. He didn't write to us, and didn't send us any money. So Fega, Aaron, and I take care of Mayor. He is so funny and cute. He calls Fega and me, Mommy." Sarah smiled. "He's adorable. I wish I had more food to give him. He's so thin and growing up so slowly. I don't understand how could he leave you." Samuel was in shock. "Aaron tells us all the time, I wish he was dead." "I don't wish him to be dead. But I also need a reason to not hate him so much for leaving us. Mom would never leave us." "What about your grandma?" "She's too old, Samuel. She doesn't eat too much, but she can't work either. She can make a fire and clean the house, but that's about it. Fega and I are trying to find any job, but it's not easy. Also, if we find any food, we feed Mayor first." "Are you hungry?" "Yes. As usual. Wait for me here. Don't move." Samuel ran home and soon came back with bread and sugar. "Here, eat." Sarah took a small piece and hid the rest in her bag. "It's for Mayor." "Thanks. Would your mother be angry with you for this?" "Oh, no. What are you talking about? I'll give you more tomorrow. I'll wait for you here. Please come." Since then, Samuel saw Sarah often and never forgot to bring some food for her. He either stole it from his mother or the neighbors or shared his own meal with Sarah. One night, Sarah didn't sleep well. In the morning, when she woke up, her grandmother's hand was heavier and her feet were colder than usual. Sarah was freezing and tired. She tried to get up, but the pressure of her grandmother's arm didn't allow her to move. She slept unusually soundly. Sarah didn't want to wake her up, but was unable to free herself from Granny. "Granny," she called, whispering. "Granny, it's already morning. I have to get up, Granny." Granny was sleeping. "Fega," Sarah called. "Please help me. I can't wake Granny. She's holding me very tight." Fega came closer, looked at Grandma, and her heart missed a beat. A face of death stared at her. Granny wasn't with them anymore. Fega stood motionless, paralyzed by the shock, looking at their dead grandmother in disbelief. "Granny," Sarah called again louder, pushing her grandmother harder. "Granny, wake up. Please let me go. Fega, please help me." "Sarah, Granny's dead," Fega whispered in horror. Then, she climbed on the bed and tried to lift her grandmother's hand, but the body was not flexible. With great difficulty, she helped Sarah free herself from the embrace of the cold body. The boys were still sleeping in the same bed as the girls looked at the corpse in complete silence, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Fega started to cry. She sat on the floor, covered her face with her hands, and sobbed. Sarah didn't cry. Her mind was blank and her throat was constricted. She wanted to cry, but couldn't. Her body was numb. She looked down at Fega and sat right next to her, hugging her older sister tight. "Shish shish, shish shish," she whispered into Fega's ear. That was the way her mother comforted them if they were hurt when she was alive. "Shish shish, shish shish." Then, like thunder, she was struck down with grief, and she screamed, "No, Sarah, please don't scream." Fega embraced her sister into her arms. "Please, Sarah, don't scream. Shish shish, shish shish." But Sarah kept screaming, "Sarah, please. Shish shish, shish shish. Please don't." And Fega sobbed. The boys woke up and looked in shock at their sisters crying on the floor. "What happened?" Aaron asked, but he didn't get an answer. He looked at his grandmother that was lying right next to him. "What happened to Grandma? Why is her hand sticking out in the air like this?" "She's dead, Aaron," Fega finally said. Mayer crawled closer to his granny and kissed her hand. That was the way his sisters comforted him if he got hurt. "Granny, I'm sorry. Here." He kissed her hand again. "It doesn't hurt anymore." "Does it, Grandma?" He was too young to understand what death was. Sarah got up from the floor. "Come here, Mayer." "Good morning, Mommy." "Good morning, sweetheart. It doesn't hurt Granny anymore. She is asleep forever. She will never wake up." She hugged her little brother and cried and cried. The children didn't know what to do with their grandmother's dead body. But they knew that they needed to find food because they were hungry. So, their daily routine began. "Mayer, don't go anywhere, okay?" Sarah said. "We'll try to bring you something to eat." "Okay, Mommy. I'll be here. I'll sing Grandma a lullaby so that she sleeps better." Sarah, Fega, and Aaron left. Sarah and Fega were walking the entire day around town trying to earn some money, but to no avail. In the evening, the food market became deserted and it became the time for orphans to scavenge what they could find. Usually, sellers disposed some vegetables or fruits that had started to rot. And a group of orphans watched them like a flock of greedy, hungry seagulls. As soon as the sellers left, the orphans ran and dug into the waste, stuffing their mouths with all they could grab from the garbage can. Sarah and Fega walked through the market. They were too late. There was nothing they could eat there. Suddenly, Sarah found a rotten potato under the table. She picked it up. removed the rotten part with her fingers, wiped it with her dress, and put it into her pocket to give to Meir. When they came home, they found their little brother laying in the bed next to his dead grandmother, playing with her gray hair. He heard the door open, but didn't rush to move from under the blanket. Their house smelled terribly. Meir, what happened here? Sarah asked, trying to understand where this smell came from. Nothing, Mommy, he said. Granny is still sleeping. Come here, Meir. I brought you something. Sarah removed the potato from her pocket and handed it to Meir. He chewed it greedily. Mommy, did you eat anything today? Yes, Meir, we did, Fega replied. The door opened and Aaron walked in. What's that smell? He asked with disgust. It's Granny. We have to remove her from the house, Fega said. We have to bury her. How? She is so heavy. We don't have to do it, Aaron said. I've talked to the doctor today. You did what? I was begging for food as usual, and people pushed me away. But then I saw our doctor. So, I ran to him and asked him to give me something to eat. He recognized me, but he didn't give me anything. I told him about our grandma and he said that he would send a casket. He also told me that if we don't find any other food, we can cook turtles and frogs and eat them. Eat frogs! Fega screamed. Yes. He said that people eat them, so I went to a pond and caught 5 frogs. He removed frogs from his pocket and placed them on a table. I just don't know how to cook them. The children heard steps outside, and the door opened. The doctor came in, and a couple more people followed him. Hello, children, he said. We're going to take your dead grandmother away. Several men lifted the dead body and carried it outside. So, Aaron, did you catch any turtles or frogs in the pond today? The doctor asked. Yes. Great. Now, you have to make a fire and cook them. How do we cook them? Fega asked. Oh, you can put them in boiling water, or if it's a frog, you can pierce it through with a stick. Hold it over an open fire for some time, and then just eat it. I never tasted it, but I know that in other countries, people think it's delicious. The children hoped that the doctor would give them something to eat, but instead he said, well, I guess you're good now. Have a good night. Then, he left. By word of mouth, the neighbors found out very quickly about the grandmother's death. These kids will die soon too. One neighbor spoke to another. Yes, there is no way they can survive. I know. 4 children alone. Also, what can we expect from the children of a policeman and an ex-convict? They are poor children. Oh well. God sits there and watches us. He knows better. Everything has a reason. God is simply cleaning up the mess that all the bad people made. So, if they die by God's will. Yay, poor children. A few neighbors came to the orphans. Some out of curiosity, while others came to bring some food. Although none of them forgot to take something in exchange from the house, the children didn't have much, and soon they found themselves in an empty house. There were only foreign books still standing in straight rows on the bookshelves. These books, along with some other papers that Red Army soldiers were not able to read, were thrown away from the house onto a garbage pile. So Isaac would pick them up at night and bring them to his mother's house. It was already late at night when a huge neighbor came storming into the house. Ignoring the children, he looked around. The bookshelf caught his attention. He had no interest in foreign books but thought that the bookshelf might be useful. He grabbed it with his hands, trying to detach it from the wall. But it was nailed firmly. He was disappointed. There was nothing he could take. Then, he took a quick look at the children and noticed that 8-year-old Aaron was wearing his father's jersey. I could use that, he said, and forcefully took it off the boy. Aaron faithfully stood there and cried, letting the big guy rob him. Please, don't take it from me, Aaron sobbed. You're going to die anyway, the man said and headed to the front door. Fega ran after him, grabbing his shirt and angrily yelling. He turned around and punched her in the face with his fist. "You dirty kike, get off me!" and slammed the door behind him. Fega sat on the floor, wiping her bloody and teary face. Her frightened siblings surrounded her. "Mommy, don't cry." Meir hugged her with his small hands. "I love you, Mommy." He was too small, but he understood what happened. "Mommy, are we going to die?" "No, Meir," Sarah replied. "We are not going to die. We are going to live a long life, and one day we'll be happy again. I promise you." Fega hugged her sister. And they both cried and cried. Sarah and Fega continued to walk through the town looking for any source of income they could find. They weren't lucky that day and, hoping for some help, came to the place where Sarah usually met Samuel, but he wasn't there. Samuel hadn't seen Sarah for more than a week already. He was lucky these days because he found a job and had to go there much earlier in the morning and leave late at night. He had no idea what had happened to her. The girls waited a long time, and then, being desperate, headed to Riva's house. It was already dark outside when they knocked on the Riva's door. "Rivka," a neighbor called. "There are some orphans asking for you." She opened the door. Sarah and Fega stood in front of her. They had grown since the last time she saw them. The girls were thin and pale. Even though Fega was older, she looked weaker than Sarah and bore Jeannie's resemblance. She had inherited her father's eyes, though, and so had Sarah. "Aunt Riva. We're looking for Samuel," Sarah said. "Do you know where he is?" "I don't. And what are you two doing here this late?" "Samuel promised to bring us some food. We didn't eat anything today. And Aaron and Meir are starving too." "Samuel promised to bring you food?" Riva was outraged. Where did he get it? Sarah suddenly realized that Samuel had lied to her. She was looking at Riva in silence, hoping for mercy. Riva looked at the girls in disbelief. "Where is your father? And what happened to your face, Fega?" "Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. He left us long ago, and Grandma died a day before yesterday," Sarah replied. "Our neighbor stole Aaron's jacket. I yelled at him, so he hit me in my face," Fega added. Riva was shocked. There was nothing sadder than when the children were deprived of their parents' care. But she didn't want to know any more details about them. She just wanted them to go away. Their resemblance to Isaac irritated her. Riva couldn't stand it. While she talked to the girls, their father's shadow was present and a new wave of anger and hate filled Riva's heart. She remembered how she confessed to Isaac, hoping for some help, and how he'd walked away. Not only that, but he was also in a much better situation than Riva was now. She couldn't help his children anyway. "Wait here," she said, and rushed to her room. She returned with some bread and gave it to Sarah. "That's all I have. Don't come back to me." "I have no more," Riva warned. The door closed behind the girl's back. Riva returned to her room and threw herself on the bed, sobbing heavily. What choice did she have? Shame and hate gnawed at her terribly. Do I have to run after them, stop them, and give them more? She didn't have more. Do I have to invite them in and share with them my room? She didn't have extra place to share. Do I have to tell them to come back again? What for? She had nothing to offer. What about my children, and my life? Who cares about me? No one. Do I have to become a mother of Jeannie's children? Could I? Must I? There were too many orphans roaming the streets. Their life turned out to be so cruel and unfair. Jeannie never listened to me. Ever. Riva's heart ached. How many times I told her not to get involved into this secret revolutionary group. She ignored my advice, and was convicted. Riva sobbed. And then, who helped her to find a job? Riva did. I risked my reputation, but I helped her, regardless. Didn't I tell her to wash and clean during the typhus epidemic? Didn't I? She did. I did. Did she listen? No. Not only had she ignored my advice again, She also thought I was an idiot. Riva wiped tears from her face. Now she's dead, and I have to deal with her fugitive husband and orphan children. Is it my duty to take care of them? Now I have to live with shame for the rest of my life, because of her faults. I didn't abandon her children, Isaac did. How could he? How would I live with this shame? She was screaming inside, but it didn't matter anymore. She'd made her choice. Fega and Sarah would never forgive her for as long as they both lived. Riva blamed Samuel for stealing food from his brother and sisters, but he ignored her. His heart belonged to Sarah and he was ready to do anything to help her and to be with her. Riva and her children didn't starve, but they had just enough to survive because she had a job. However, she hated her life, and there was nothing she could do to change it. To survive, she did her best in the face of failing and losing it. Riva watched the new generation grow up being taught the communist ideas and rules. And she was one of those teachers who taught youngsters those ideas, even though they were against her nature. She hated those youngsters. Her own children were not much different to everybody else. They lived their lives being involved in the communist regime, as well as its traditions and ideas. The more they grew up, the more distant and withdrawn they became from their mother. At first, Riva hoped that her life would return to the old lifestyle, but years passed and nothing changed. She was never happy, and nobody ever saw her smile. There were a lot of hateful, arrogant, and ignorant people in the world, and the orphans suffered from their cruelty. However, there were other people who helped the children to survive. They offered Fega and Sarah different jobs, and the girls were always ready for any opportunity. They cleaned houses, worked in kitchens of different eateries, and babysat small children. A neighbor shoemaker taught Aaron how to repair shoes, while the boy also brought food home for his little brother and sisters. No matter how hard they tried, they made very little money. To survive, they caught turtles in a nearby river, took off their shells, and ate them raw. The children didn't have firewood to make a fire to cook them. Fall arrived, and the children started coming to the fields after the harvest to pick up leftover sunflower and wheat seeds, though there wasn't that much to gather. The weather grew colder every day. And then it started to snow. They had only one pair of boots that belonged to their grandmother, so they had to share them to go outside. Therefore, only one of them could wrap their feet into cloth bags, shove them into the boots, and go into the field to dig some seeds or find wooden sticks for a fire. The others stayed home, waiting. The children were always starving, so they tried to sleep more to get rid of that horrible feeling. If they happened to be lucky enough to get more than enough food to satisfy their hunger, they wouldn't eat it all and would save some for a rainy day. When winter came, the children ran out of wood quickly. To keep warm, they cuddled each other, as they usually did when their grandma was alive. When it was extremely cold, they burned the books. Meir suffered the most. "Mommy, wrap me up. I'm cold," he would say to Sarah or Fega. And the girls would then wrap their little brother in towels. Meir was an adorable little kid, and the older children loved him dearly. All the books were burned. Aaron chipped a piece of wood and searched for some paper. "Fega, can I use this paper to make a fire?" "No, you can't," she said. "Mommy told me that these are documents from Palestine and they say that she owns a house and land there." "Why do we need them anyway, Fega? What is Palestine? Mommy's not with us anymore. We need to make a fire, and there's no other paper here. We'll freeze to death. This is just a story. If there is a God, he would help us anyway." He didn't receive any answer. The papers easily caught fire. The proof of private property ownership, which was worth a fortune, burned, creating sparks that briefly reflected in the children's eyes and warming their small, cold, and hungry bodies. Those children were the possessors of the most expensive land in Palestine, yet they were the coldest, most miserable, and starving children in the entire world. The children lay down on their mattress and Fega told them a story about the beautiful warm country of Palestine. Her mother told her a story a long time ago, and it seemed like a tale. She painted a picture of Jerusalem in her siblings' imagination. The city shined like gold when the sun rose. The cold, gray room turned into a sunny, green garden filled with juicy grapes and fruits. The children imagined as God flew toward them on a bright pink cloud covered with beautiful flowers from the glimmering sky. God came closer. No, it was not God. It was their mother. She gave them fresh bread and warm milk as a joyful melody filled the air. Then, she took them to a big, beautiful, and warm house where they prayed for the food they had and the life they lived. Fega, when I grow up, I'll be a pilot, Aaron said, closing his eyes. And then I'll fly us all to mommy. Finally, the children were asleep. Fega closed her eyes, thinking about her mother. Oh, she missed her mother singing good night so very much. She was a wonderful storyteller, and all those stories about their native land remained like a dream that would never going to come true. Fega didn't believe a single word she'd just told her little brothers. We have no chance of surviving this winter, she thought, and was about to cry, but was too tired and simply fell asleep.